In a previous video, I've talked about using Liquid in portals to further customize the experience for the end user. So in a portal, it's the contact that's logged in. They are classed as a user, so we can put things like user.fullname, user.firstname, and display that globally throughout the portal. So in other words, it doesn't matter which page we're on, what entity form we're looking at, and so on. We can get access to that information. However, when we display things like a case, for example, here we're looking at a case in the portal, what happens is when we load that entity form, it loads the actual record that we're looking at. So it's basically got that GUID there, so we're calling it. What we can then do is we can utilize that and then pull out other fields and other information about that specific record. So in this example, we've got the case. We can use incident.title, incident.case reference number, whatever that might be, and actually display that information. Now, in the previous video, what I did was I put the Liquid directly into that page copy. What we're going to do and look at in this video is we're going to look at using content snippets. So if I go into the content snippets area, if you haven't looked at these before or used them, this allows you to add in text or HTML or JavaScript and then be able to call that and put it into web templates. So it means that you can create a content snippet with information and just call the snippet and use that in multiple other areas. And then when you want to make changes, you're just changing the content snippet itself rather than having to go through to every single web template or piece of content that's using that same information and edit all of those. We can just do it in one place. So we're going to start off and we're going to go ahead and create a new content snippet. So we'll give it a name. Now, when you're naming it, try and use a logical naming convention. So this is basically customer services, it's case, and then we want to put some information in the header in the top of that case. So then with our website, if you've got multiple in there, then go ahead and search for it. I've got a few, so I've just searched for customer self-service, but most likely you're just going to have one. And then the display name, this is really more for internal purposes, so I'm going to put just case header info. And then we've got an option to either have text, which is obviously just going to be raw text, or HTML. So if you want to do some kind of coding, then we'll use that option. Content snippet language, so if you've got multiple languages, you're going to select from that. I don't, so I'm just going to leave it blank. All right, so if we want to start using fields from the incident, then what we need to do is we will open it using those and then do incident dot and then whatever the field is from the case. So it might be title, or it might be created on or modified on and so on. So what we're going to do is I'm going to go ahead and paste in something that I've created earlier just to speed up time so we can see what we've put in here. So we've got this case was opened on, and then I'm using the incident.created on, and the last update was provided on the modified on date. So if you're not sure what the field name is, you're going to want to go into your customization area, find the field, and then look at the actual field name that it has, rather than guessing, because then you're not sure if it's not displaying. Is it just wrong, or have you picked the wrong field name or typed in the wrong field name? Then what we're going to do is we're going to say the incident has been given a priority level of, and the priority is called priority code. However, with something that's an option set, you can either call the value, which would be the number sequence, or it might be 1, 2, 3, and so on, or we're going to call the label, and that's going to be the actual words that are used for that priority. So that's going to be your high, your medium, your low, your standard, whatever it is that you're using in your environment. So we put in all that information, then we're going to go ahead and save it. So we've got that, that's great. This can be used now in a variety of places, but at the minute there isn't anything in the portal that knows about this. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to web templates, and we're going to go to our customer service self-service portal one and look at the edit case. So now it's a matter of, well, where do you want to actually put that on that specific page. So this is the start of the form. So this is the start of the form that you're using your entity form to display the actual fields. So what we can do is we can say, right, well, let's go ahead and put that right above the form. And what we're using is a little bit of code that basically says, okay, we're going to put in an editable snippet. And then in here, this is the very first field that I've filled out, and that's the name of that content snippet. So that's what you're going to be wanting to put in there. And the type is what we selected, which is HTML. And then we'll go ahead and save this. Now let's go back to the portal. Now, one thing to keep in mind when you're making changes to things like web templates and content snippets, sometimes it can take a little while for that information to actually be displayed. Luckily on my example, it has not. However, what you might find is because the portal caches information and caches what the site looks like at a certain point in time, you might have to just keep refreshing, and even to the extent where you might need to actually do a reboot of the portal. So just keep that in mind. So that's great. We can see that it's pulled out and says this case was open on this date. This has been open for a really long time, and the last update was provided on this date. So that's what we wanted to see. It's also got a priority level of high. So that's perfect. That gives a little bit more information. You could obviously color code it. You could change information. But if I want to do anything with regards to making those changes, we can now ignore that web template because we've called that snippet. So now what we're doing is anytime we want to make any changes, then guess what? All I need to do is go back to that snippet and make it there. So if I want to change this and I want to make it bold, I can just select it and then use the WYSIWYG editor. What you see is what you get. That's what that stands for. And I can make that bold, save it, and then go ahead and refresh to see that. So very straightforward. However, what about if I'm looking at a case that is closed? So if I go into this closed case, that's great. I've still got the same information. We're seeing that the case was opened on this date and the last update was provided on this date. But really what I should be seeing is something that says, instead of the last update, your case was resolved on this date instead. So what we can do now is if I go back to my content snippet and let's remove this. And instead, let's do something a little bit different and have some conditions around this. So what we're doing first of all is we're basically saying if the incident state code label, so the state code is basically the status, so whether something is active or inactive. And because we need to query the label. So we're basically saying you could do the value if you knew those, but I'm doing the label. So if the state code on a case is active, then put the text that I just showed you in the last example. So if it's active, let's show when it was created and when the last update was provided. And we'll also show the priority. However, or else if is the code, if the incident state code label is inactive, then instead let's put when the case was opened, but also when it was resolved. And we've also got, for questions regarding the case, please contact support. So now we've got two conditions, and we're basically saying if it's currently open, display this information. If it's not and it's been resolved, let's go ahead, or it's inactive, let's go ahead and show this other information. Now, you can obviously use any variety of filters, or basically use whatever field makes sense to say we're querying and saying what's the status of this case, or what's the priority of this case, and show this information versus this information, and so on. So we've made that change to the content snippet. Now in theory, if I refresh and I'm not holding onto the cache, that's perfect. It's done it immediately. Fantastic. So now we can see this was when the case was opened and this was when the case was resolved. So the information that we're providing to the end user, to the contact that's logged in, is now very specific based on the actual status of that case. So much easier, much more beneficial, and providing more value to that specific contact. So now if we go to an open case, now we can see that it's got the case, the date the case was opened, the last update date, and we've also got that priority level again. So you can see the two differences, whether it's a closed case or an open case. So hopefully that's helpful, gives a little bit more information and insight into using Liquid. So if you haven't already checked out the other video, which is starting off using Liquid, go ahead and check that out. Let me know what you think in the comments below.